The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:07 a.m. when my phone buzzed. I'd been lying there for 3 hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old radiator clank and hiss in our Portland brownstone. The heating system was older than our marriage, which suddenly felt like saying something. My boss kept me for 5 more minutes. "Don't worry." I read Laya's text twice, then set the phone down carefully on the nightstand. 5 minutes. That was rich. I'm Jack Maris, and I restore antiques for a living, which means I notice details other people miss. Like how those 5 minutes had apparently lasted through 2 bottles of wine based on the Uber receipt I'd seen sticking out of her purse earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days bringing broken things back to life, making them whole again. But sitting there in our bedroom, surrounded by the carefully restored Victorian furniture we'd collected over 10 years of marriage, I realized some things are too far gone to fix. I picked up my phone and typed back, "I hope those 5 minutes with him were worth our 10 years together." The response came faster than I expected. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You're being paranoid again." Paranoid? That was Laya's favorite word lately. Paranoid when I asked why she'd started working late every Tuesday and Thursday. Paranoid when I noticed she'd changed her phone password. Paranoid when I mentioned that her emergency work meetings always seemed to coincide with her boss Chase North being in town. I got out of bed and walked to the window. Our street was empty except for Mrs. Penrose's cat prowling around the garbage cans. 3 houses down, I could see the blue glow of someone else's television. Insomniacs and cheating wives. Portland after midnight was full of secrets. The thing about being married to someone for 10 years is that you learn their patterns. Laya had always been a terrible liar, but she'd gotten better at it recently. Practice makes perfect, I suppose. She used to fidget with her wedding ring when she was nervous. Now she just took it off entirely, claiming it caught on her laptop keyboard. My phone buzzed again. "I'm staying at Jennifer's tonight. We'll talk tomorrow." Jennifer, her college roommate who lived in Seattle. I wondered if Laya remembered that Jennifer had called our house last week looking for her. Apparently, they hadn't spoken in months. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe or drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I opened the Find My Phone app we'd set up years ago for emergencies. The little dot that represented my wife was currently located at the Harborview condos downtown. Expensive place. The kind of place where Chase North, regional sales director for a tech company and married father of 2, might keep a second apartment. I sat back down on the bed and stared at that little dot on my screen. 10 years of marriage reduced to a GPS coordinate and a lie about 5 minutes. The radiator clanked again, and I made a mental note to fix it. Just because everything else was falling apart didn't mean I had to let the house go too. Laya came home at 7:30 the next morning looking like she'd slept in her clothes. She probably had, just not at Jennifer's place in Seattle. She moved through our kitchen with the careful precision of someone trying not to appear guilty, making coffee with exaggerated normalcy. "You're up early?" she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Couldn't sleep. I was sitting at our kitchen table, the one I'd restored from a 1920s farmhouse auction. The irony of working on our relationship at a table I'd literally brought back to life wasn't lost on me. "How was your emergency meeting?" "Exhausting. Chase is really demanding when it comes to the quarterly reports." She poured coffee into her favorite mug, the one that said, "World's Best Wife." I'd bought it for her 3 Christmases ago. Now, it felt like a cruel joke. "I'm sure he is." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of her location. Funny thing about those quarterly reports, they seem to require a lot of work at the Harborview condos. Her hand froze halfway to her mouth. Coffee sloshed over the rim of the mug, staining her white blouse. The same blouse she'd worn to work yesterday, now wrinkled and smelling faintly of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. You're tracking me now? That's really healthy, Jack. We set that up together, remember? For emergencies. I stood up and walked over to her, though I suppose this qualifies as an emergency. She set the mug down hard enough to chip it. I don't have to explain myself to you. If you can't trust me after 10 years, trust is earned, Laya. And lately, you've been spending a lot of time earning something else entirely. Her face flushed red. You're being ridiculous. Chase and I work together. Sometimes that means working late. Sometimes that means grabbing drinks to discuss strategy. It's called networking. Jack, maybe if you understood how real careers work. Real careers. I laughed. But there wasn't any humor in it, right? Because restoring antiques isn't a real career, just like our marriage isn't a real marriage, apparently. She grabbed her purse and keys. I can't deal with your jealousy right now. I'm going to work. After she left, I went upstairs to our bedroom. I'd been married to Laya long enough to know her hiding spots. She thought she was clever, but she'd always been predictable. In college, she hid her diary behind her textbooks. In our first apartment, she kept her emergency cash in an old jewelry box. I found the second phone in her closet, tucked inside a shoebox behind her winter boots. The phone wasn't password protected. Apparently, Laya figured if I found it, the game would be over anyway. She was right about that. The text chain with Chase went back 4 months. 4 months of working late in emergency meetings and 5 more minutes. 4 months of them laughing about how clueless I was, how easy it was to fool the antique guy. One message from 3 weeks ago made my hands shake. Jack's been suspicious lately. Maybe we should cool it for a while. Chase's response. Don't worry about him. What's he going to do? Give me a hard time? Besides, once you get your grandmother's inheritance next month, you can leave him and we can stop sneaking around. Laya's grandmother had left her a substantial trust fund, but only if she was married when she turned 35. Her birthday was next month. I'd been planning a surprise party. The final message was from last night, sent at 1:47 a.m. Told him I was working late. He's getting suspicious, but I can handle him. Just 1 more month and we're free. I sat on our bed, surrounded by the furniture we'd collected together, holding the evidence of my wife's betrayal. 10 years of marriage, and I'd been reduced to an obstacle to be handled. I took pictures of every message, then put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Laya thought she could handle me? She was about to learn how wrong she was. Mickey's Tavern sits on the waterfront, the kind of place where dock workers and fishermen drink alongside hipsters who think they're getting an authentic Portland experience. Mickey Brennan, the owner, had been my best friend since high school. He was also an ex-cop who understood the value of information. So, she's been playing house with her boss, Mickey said, sliding a beer across the bar. It was barely noon, but this felt like the kind of conversation that required alcohol. And you've got proof. 4 months' worth. I showed him the photos I'd taken of the text messages. They're planning to dump me right after she gets her inheritance. Mickey studied the messages, his cop instincts still sharp, even though he'd traded his badge for a bar towel 5 years ago. Chase North. I know that name. Comes in here sometimes with his buddies from the tech company. Real smooth talker. The kind of guy who tips big and expects everyone to remember it. What's his story? Married to some lawyer. got 2 kids in private school, drives a BMW, lives in one of those new developments out in Falmouth. The kind of guy who thinks the rules don't apply to him. Mickey poured himself a shot of whiskey. What are you thinking of doing about it? I'm working on that. The truth was, I'd been up all night thinking about it. My first instinct had been to confront them directly, but that would just give them time to cover their tracks. Laya was smart, and Chase had money and connections. If I played this wrong, I'd end up looking like the crazy, jealous husband while they rode off into the sunset with my wife's inheritance. You know what your problem is, Jack? Mickey leaned against the bar. You're too nice. Always have been. Even in high school, you'd rather fix something than fight about it. Maybe it's time to try a different approach. I spent the afternoon following Laya. She really did go to work, which was something. Her office was in one of those glass towers downtown, all clean lines and corporate ambition. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:30, she came out with Chase North. I recognized him from the company website. Tall, perfectly groomed. The kind of guy who probably had his shirts professionally pressed. They walked to a restaurant 2 blocks away, choosing a table by the window, like they wanted to be seen. I took photos from across the street using the telephoto lens I'd bought for photographing antique details. They sat close together, Laya laughing at something he said, her hand resting on his arm. To anyone watching, they looked like exactly what they were. 2 people having an affair. After lunch, they walked back toward her office building. But instead of going inside, they ducked into the parking garage. I followed, keeping my distance. Chase's BMW was parked on the 3rd level in a corner spot away from the security cameras. They didn't notice me watching from behind a concrete pillar as Chase pressed Laya against his car and kissed her. It was the kind of kiss that left no doubt about their relationship. I took more photos, feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. Pathetic, isn't it? I spun around to find a thin man in his 20s watching me. He had the pale complexion and nervous energy of someone who spent too much time in front of a computer. Excuse me, Chase and your wife. I'm Jonah, by the way. I work with Laya. He adjusted his glasses and looked uncomfortable. I've been watching this train wreck for months. You know who I am? She's got your picture on her desk, though she's been turning it face down lately. Jonah glanced toward Chase's car, where my wife was still locked in an embrace with her boss. Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Chase has been bragging about how he's going to get rid of you. Get rid of me? How? He's planning to provoke you into doing something stupid. Get you arrested, maybe. Make you look unstable so Laya can file for divorce and claim you're dangerous. Jonah shifted nervously. I thought you should know. She seems nice enough, but what she's doing to you, it's not right. I watched my wife laugh at something Chase whispered in her ear. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen what guys like Chase do to people. They think they can manipulate everyone around them, use them up, and throw them away. Jonah handed me a business card. My number's on there. If you need any other information about what goes on at the office, let me know. After Jonah left, I stayed in the parking garage for another hour, thinking Chase and Laya had underestimated me, which was their first mistake. They thought I was just some blue-collar guy who worked with his hands, someone they could outsmart and outmaneuver. They were about to learn that I hadn't spent 20 years restoring broken things without learning how to take them apart first. I started small, Tuesday night. While Laya was at another emergency meeting, I paid a visit to Chase's BMW in the parking garage. The security cameras had blind spots. I'd mapped them out during my surveillance. I didn't do anything dramatic, just loosened the valve caps on his tires enough to cause a slow leak and left a note under his windshield wiper. 5 minutes can cost you everything. The next morning, Laya came home looking frustrated. "Everything okay?" I asked, not looking up from my newspaper. "Chase had car trouble yesterday. Had to call AAA." She poured coffee with more force than necessary. "Someone's been vandalizing cars in that garage. That's terrible. You should be more careful where you park." She gave me a sharp look, but I kept reading the sports section like I cared about the Red Sox's chances this season. The real game started that afternoon. I'd spent years building relationships with clients who collected everything from Civil War memorabilia to Victorian furniture. Rich people love to gossip, and they especially love gossip about other rich people. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore had been buying antiques from me for 8 years. She was 73, wealthy, and knew everyone worth knowing in Portland's social circles. More importantly, she was married to a retired judge who played golf with half the city's business leaders. "Jack, dear, how lovely to see you," she said when I arrived at her Beacon Hill mansion with a restored mahogany secretary desk she'd commissioned. "This is absolutely beautiful work." "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. I was wondering if you might know someone, Chase North. He works for TechFlow Solutions." Her expression shifted slightly. "Oh yes, I know Chase. His wife Marina and I serve on the hospital charity board together. Lovely woman, though she's been looking rather strained lately." She paused, studying my face. "Why do you ask?" "He's been working closely with my wife on some projects. I was thinking of inviting him and his wife to dinner, but I wanted to make sure he was reputable." Mrs. Whitmore's eyes sharpened. She had the instincts of someone who'd survived 70 years of high society politics. "How closely has he been working with your wife?" "Very closely. Late nights, weekend meetings. You know how demanding these corporate types can be?" "Indeed." She was quiet for a moment, then smiled in a way that reminded me why she'd been the most feared hostess in Portland for 3 decades. "You know, I think Marina would be very interested in meeting Laya. Perhaps I could arrange something." I left Mrs. Whitmore's house feeling like I just lit a very long fuse. In my experience, the best way to destroy something wasn't with a sledgehammer. It was by finding the weak points and applying pressure until the whole structure collapsed. That evening, Laya announced she'd be working late again. "Big presentation tomorrow," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Chase wants to go over everything one more time." "I'm sure he does." I looked up from the antique clock I was repairing. "You know, you've been working a lot of late nights lately. Maybe you should ask for a raise." "It's not about money, Jack. It's about advancement. Building a career." She grabbed her keys and purse. "Some of us have ambitions beyond fixing old furniture." After she left, I called Mickey. "How do you feel about a little field work?" I asked. "Depends." "What kind of field work?" "The kind that involves following my wife and her boyfriend to whatever romantic spot they're using tonight." Mickey was quiet for a moment. "You sure you want to go down this road, Jack? Once you start playing these games, it's hard to stop." "They started the game, Mickey. I'm just learning the rules." An hour later, Mickey and I were parked outside the Harbor View condos, watching Chase's BMW in the visitor parking. The building was one of those modern glass towers that had sprouted up along Portland's waterfront. All clean lines and expensive views. "Nice place," Mickey observed. "Must cost him a fortune to keep a second apartment here." "Company expense account, probably. I bet he writes it off as business entertainment." We didn't have to wait long. At 9:47 p.m., Chase and Laya emerged from the building, walking close together toward his car. They were laughing about something, completely oblivious to our presence 50 yards away. "They look pretty comfortable," Mickey said. 4 months of practice. I raised my camera and took more photos. The question is, how comfortable are they going to be when everyone else knows about it? Chase drove Laya back to her car at the office building, and we followed at a distance. When she got in her Honda and headed home, Mickey and I stayed behind to watch Chase. Instead of going home to his wife and kids in Falmouth, Chase drove to a bar called The Anchor, a trendy place that catered to Portland's young professional crowd. He met two other men at a corner table, colleagues based on their similar expensive casual clothes and confident demeanor. "Let's get closer," I said. Mickey parked across the street, and we walked into The Anchor like two guys grabbing a drink after work. The place was crowded enough that we could blend in, and we found seats at the bar within earshot of Chase's table. "Telling you, she's completely wrapped around my finger," Chase was saying, his voice carrying over the ambient noise. "Thinks I'm going to leave my wife for her." One of his companions laughed. "And after she gets the inheritance, I'll find a reason to break it off. Maybe I'll discover I can't walk away from my children after all. Women love that noble sacrifice stuff." Chase took a long pull from his beer. "The husband's starting to get suspicious, but he's not going to be a problem. Guy fixes old furniture for a living. What's he going to do? Make a scene?" They all laughed at that. Mickey's hand tightened around his beer bottle, and I put a restraining hand on his arm. "Not here," I murmured. "Not yet." We listened for another 20 minutes as Chase detailed his plan to manipulate Laya into leaving me, get access to her inheritance, then dump her once he'd gotten what he wanted. He talked about my wife like she was a business acquisition, something to be used and discarded. When we left the bar, Mickey was quiet until we reached his car. "That guy's a real piece of work," he finally said. "Yeah, he is." I stared back at the Anchor's neon sign, but he made one mistake. "What's that?" "He thinks I'm just going to sit back and let him destroy my life." I got into the passenger seat. Time to show him what this furniture guy can really do. The beauty of living in a city like Portland is that everyone's connected to everyone else by no more than 2 degrees of separation. Mrs. Whitmore proved this when she called me 3 days later. "Jack, dear, I had lunch with Marina North yesterday," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone wealthy women use when they're about to deliver devastating gossip. "Such an interesting conversation. I hope she's doing well." "Oh, she's doing wonderfully now. It seems she's been having some concerns about her husband's work habits lately, all those late nights and weekend meetings." Mrs. Whitmore paused for effect. "I mentioned that your wife has been working similar hours with the same company. Marina was very interested to learn that." I felt a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. I imagined she was. "She'd like to meet you both. Perhaps dinner this weekend." I took the liberty of suggesting Saturday at 7 at the Portland Club. I hope that works for you. The Portland Club was Old Money Portland's temple of social networking, the kind of place where business deals were made over brandy and reputations were destroyed over cocktail conversation. Having dinner there with Chase's wife would be like detonating a social bomb. "That sounds perfect, Mrs. Whitmore." "Thank you." "My pleasure, dear. I do so enjoy bringing people together." That evening, I mentioned the dinner invitation to Laya while she was getting ready for another late meeting. "Dinner with who?" She froze in the middle of applying lipstick. Chase's wife, Marina, Mrs. Whitmore, arranged it. She thought it would be nice for us to meet since you and Chase work so closely together. The lipstick tube slipped from Isla's fingers and clattered into the bathroom sink. We can't. I'm busy Saturday night with what?" "Work stuff. You know how it is." Actually, I don't know how it is. But I'm sure Chase will understand if you skip one evening of overtime to have dinner with his wife. I leaned against the bathroom door frame, unless there's some reason you don't want to meet her. Laya's reflection in the mirror looked trapped. Of course not. It's just the timing isn't great. I already accepted. It would be rude to cancel now. I straightened up. Don't worry. I'm sure you and Marina will have lots to talk about. You probably have more in common than you think. I left her standing in the bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror like she was looking at a stranger. The next morning, I got a call from Jonah. Chase is freaking out, he said without preamble. Someone told him his wife wants to meet your wife for dinner. He's been making phone calls all morning trying to figure out how that happened. Interesting. Any idea what he's planning to do about it? He's talking about having Laya call in sick or maybe arranging some kind of work emergency. But here's the thing. His wife already made reservations at the Portland Club. If Laya doesn't show up, it's going to look really suspicious. Thanks for the heads up, Jonah. There's something else. Chase has been asking questions about you around the office. Wants to know if you have a temper, if you've ever been in trouble with the law. I think he's still planning to set you up somehow. Let him try. I spent Friday afternoon at Mickey's Tavern planning strategy like we were preparing for a military campaign, which, in a way, we were. So, tomorrow night, your cheating wife has dinner with the other guy's unsuspecting wife. Mickey summarized. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, if we play it right. I spread out printed photos of Chase and Laya's parking garage encounters on the bar. The question is, how do we make sure Marina sees these at exactly the right moment? Leave that to me, Mickey said. I know a guy who works at the Portland Club, owes me a favor from his wilder days. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of October chill that cuts through your jacket and settles in your bones. Laya had spent an hour getting ready, changing outfits 3 times before settling on a conservative blue dress that made her look like someone's innocent younger sister. You looked nervous, I observed as we walked up the steps to the Portland Club. I'm not nervous. I just want to make a good impression. I'm sure you will. You're very good at making impressions. The Portland Club's dining room was all dark wood and crystal chandeliers. The kind of place where conversations were conducted in hushed tones, and everyone knew everyone else's business. Marina North was already waiting at our table, and I recognized her immediately from the photos on Chase's company website. She was attractive in the way that money makes possible. Perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive clothes, the kind of understated jewelry that costs more than most people's cars. But there was something sharp in her eyes, an intelligence that suggested she was nobody's fool. You must be Jack, she said, standing to shake my hand. I'm Marina. I've heard so much about you. All good things, I hope. Oh, yes. Chase mentions you quite often. Her smile was perfectly polite and completely cold. And you must be Laya, the famous project manager. Laya's handshake was noticeably weak. Nice to meet you, Mrs. North. Please call me Marina. After all, our spouses spend so much time together. We should be friends too. The first course arrived without incident. Some kind of seafood appetizer that probably cost more than I made in a day. Marina made polite conversation about the weather and the restaurant's renovation. But I could feel her studying Laya like a scientist examining a specimen. So tell me about these projects you've been working on, Marina said as the main course was served. Chase comes home so exhausted from your late-night meetings. You must be very dedicated to your work. Laya nearly choked on her wine. We just want to make sure everything's perfect for the clients. Of course. And those weekend strategy sessions, are those common in your industry? Weekend sessions? I looked at Laya with perfectly manufactured confusion. You didn't mention working weekends. It's not. I mean, sometimes we have to. Laya was floundering, her face flushing red. Marina's smile sharpened. Oh, did I say something wrong? I just assumed. Chase mentioned working with you last weekend at some conference center. Or was it a hotel? I get confused with all his business trips. That's when Mickey's friend made his move. A waiter appeared at Marina's elbow with a manila envelope. Excuse me, Mrs. North. Someone asked me to give this to you. Marina opened the envelope and pulled out the photographs I'd taken of Chase and Laya in the parking garage. Her expression didn't change, but her knuckles went white as she gripped the pictures. How interesting, she said quietly. It seems my husband and your wife have been working very closely indeed. Laya looked at the photos and went pale. Marina, I can explain. I'm sure you can, but I don't think I want to hear it. Marina stood up, gathering the photographs. Jack, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I think we have a great deal to discuss, but perhaps not here. She walked out of the dining room with the kind of dignity that only comes from years of practice at handling social disasters. Half the restaurant was staring at our table, sensing drama, even if they couldn't hear the details. Laya sat frozen, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Well, I said, cutting into my steak. That went better than expected. Marina North called me the next morning at 8 a.m. sharp. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Are you free for coffee? An hour later, I was sitting across from her at a small cafe in the Old Port, watching her systematically destroy a blueberry muffin while she talked. She'd traded last night's elegant dinner attire for jeans and a sweater, but she still looked like someone who was used to being in control. How long have you known? She asked. About a week. You? I've suspected for months, but I didn't have proof until last night. She pushed the muffin away, untouched, except for the damage she'd inflicted while thinking. Chase thinks he's very clever, but he's actually quite predictable. The late meetings, the new clothes, the sudden interest in working out. It's all very textbook. What are you going to do? Marina's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I'm going to destroy him professionally, socially, financially, the works. The question is, do you want to help? I studied her face, looking for signs of the kind of crazy that comes with a messy divorce. Instead, I saw cold calculation and the kind of focused anger that comes from being systematically betrayed by someone you trusted. What did you have in mind? Chase's company is very concerned about their public image. They've been trying to land a contract with the city for the past 6 months. Something about upgrading the municipal computer systems. It's worth millions. She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of emails. These are from Chase's work account. He's been using company resources to maintain that apartment downtown, charging dinners with your wife to his corporate credit card, even billing the company for flowers he sent her. How did you get access to his work email? We share a home computer, and Chase has never been very good with passwords. He uses the same one for everything. Our wedding anniversary. Ironic, isn't it? I looked through the emails, whistling softly at the scope of Chase's expense account fraud. This is enough to get him fired. Fired is just the beginning. I've also been documenting his other activities, the gambling, the drinking, the pattern of harassment toward female employees. Marina's voice was perfectly calm, like she was discussing the weather. Chase thinks he's untouchable because he brings in revenue, but companies don't like executives who create liability. What about Laya? What about her? She's just another conquest to him. Once his career implodes, he'll drop her like a bad habit. Marina leaned forward, but that doesn't mean she gets to walk away without consequences. We spent the next hour planning what Marina called Operation Scorched Earth. She had contacts throughout Portland's business community, resources I couldn't match, and a level of access to Chase's life that made surveillance unnecessary. "There's a company party next Friday," she said as we prepared to leave. "Annual celebration. All the big clients will be there. Chase is supposed to give a presentation about the municipal contract Well, that depends on whether his presentation materials get accidentally corrupted beforehand. Computer problems can be so unpredictable." Marina stood up and shouldered her purse. "I'll be in touch, Jack. This is going to be fun." I spent the rest of the week watching Laya try to pretend everything was normal. She'd come home from work with the kind of forced cheerfulness that fooled nobody, asking about my day and commenting on the weather like we were polite strangers sharing an elevator. "How's the big project going?" I asked Tuesday night over dinner. "Fine, good. We're making progress." She pushed food around her plate without eating much. "Chase thinks we might wrap up ahead of schedule. That's great. More time for other things, right?" Other things. She looked up at me with something that might have been guilt. "Jack, about the other night at dinner. What about it?" Marina seemed upset when she left. I hope it wasn't something I said. I set down my fork and looked at her directly. "I think Marina was just surprised to learn how closely you and her husband have been working together. Sometimes people don't realize how their actions might be perceived by others." Laya's face flushed. "We're just colleagues, Jack. I can't help it if people want to read more into a professional relationship." "Of course not. Though I suppose it doesn't help that you've been lying to me about working weekends." "I haven't been lying, Laya." I kept my voice gentle, reasonable. "I've been married to you for 10 years. I know when you're lying. The question is, do you want to tell me the truth, or do you want to keep pretending that I'm stupid?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much she could still deny. "I need some air," she said finally, and left the house without finishing her dinner. Thursday night, Marina called with an update. "Everything's in place for tomorrow," she said. "Chase's presentation is going to be very memorable." "What about Laya?" "Oh, don't worry about your wife. I have something special planned for her too." Friday evening, I was working late in my shop when Laya came home in a state of barely controlled panic. "Jack, are you here?" I came out of the workshop to find her standing in our living room, still wearing her coat, looking like she'd seen a ghost. "Everything okay?" "There was a problem at work today with the presentation. Someone sabotaged Chase's computer files." "That's terrible. What kind of sabotage?" "All his presentation materials were replaced with personal photos. Photos of him." And she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Photos of him and who, Laya?" She looked at me with something between fear and resignation. "Photos of him and me." I nodded slowly, like this was the first I'd heard of it. That must have been embarrassing. Embarrassing doesn't begin to cover it. The whole company was there, plus clients, plus city officials. Chase's wife was there too. Laya sat down heavily on our couch. "Jack, I need to tell you something. I'm listening." But instead of confessing, she started crying. Big, dramatic sobs that might have moved me a week ago, before I'd learned exactly what kind of person I'd been married to. "I'm sorry," she said through the tears. "I'm so sorry, Jack. I never meant for any of this to happen." "Any of what, Laya?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "You know, don't you? You've known all along. I know that you've been having an affair with Chase North for 4 months. I know that you've been planning to leave me as soon as you get your inheritance. I know that you think I'm too stupid to figure out what's been going on right under my nose. I sat down across from her. What I don't know is why you thought you could get away with it. The tears stopped as suddenly as they'd started. What are you going to do? That depends on what you're going to do, Isla. Are you going to keep lying to me, or are you going to start telling the truth? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she finally looked up, the guilt was gone, replaced by something harder. Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Chase. Yes, we've been planning a future together. And yes, I was going to leave you after my birthday. Her voice was steady now, defiant. Are you happy? You got your confession. Actually, I am happy because now we both know where we stand. So, what happens now? Are you going to file for divorce? Try to take half of everything? I smiled, and something in my expression made her lean back against the couch cushions. Oh, Laya, I'm not going to file for divorce. You are? What? You're going to file for divorce, and you're going to do it before your birthday, because if you don't, everyone in Portland is going to know exactly what kind of person you really are. You can't threaten me, Jack. I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining your options. I stood up and walked to the window. Option 1, you file for divorce. We split our assets, and you walk away with your reputation mostly intact. Option 2, I make sure everyone knows about your affair, your lies, and your plan to defraud me out of your inheritance money. You wouldn't. I turned back to her. Try me. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if I was bluffing. I underestimated you, she said finally. Yes, you did. That was your first mistake. What was my second mistake? Thinking that Chase North was going to choose you over his career and his family, I picked up my jacket. By the way, you might want to check the news tomorrow. I have a feeling Chase is going to have bigger problems than deciding which woman he wants to be with. I left her sitting on our couch, finally understanding that the game had changed and she was no longer holding the winning hand. The Portland Herald's business section led with the story Saturday morning. TechFlow executive terminated following fraud investigation. The article detailed Chase North's dismissal for misusing company resources, including maintaining an unauthorized apartment and charging personal expenses to corporate accounts. But the real damage was in the social media coverage. Someone, probably Marina, had made sure the photos from Chase's sabotaged presentation found their way online. By Saturday afternoon, TechFlow's scandal was trending locally, and Chase's professional reputation was in ruins. I was reading the coverage on my tablet when Laya came downstairs looking like she hadn't slept. Did you see the news? She asked. Hard to miss it. Sounds like Chase is having a rough week. She poured coffee with shaking hands. His wife filed for divorce yesterday. She's claiming adultery and asking for full custody of the kids. Marina doesn't seem like the type to do things halfway. This is all your fault. Laya's voice was raw with exhaustion and anger. You orchestrated this whole thing. I didn't orchestrate anything, Isla. I just stopped pretending I didn't know what was going on. I looked up from the tablet. Chase destroyed his own life. I just made sure the right people found out about it. And what about me? What about us? There is no us. There hasn't been for months. I set the tablet aside. The question is, what are you going to do now that your exit strategy just imploded? She sat down across from me, and for a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married 10 years ago. Young, uncertain, a little lost. I don't know, she admitted. Chase was supposed to. We had plans. Plans that involved using me until you could afford to dump me. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Laya. I read the text messages. Remember? She was quiet for a long time, staring into her coffee cup like it might contain answers. "So, what happens now?" she asked finally. "Now you make a choice. You can file for divorce, and we can end this with whatever dignity we have left. Or you can try to salvage this marriage and spend the next 40 years wondering if I'll ever trust you again. Would you trust me again?" I considered the question seriously. "I don't know. But I know I'd never forget. Every time you worked late, every time you took a phone call in another room, every time you were 5 minutes later than expected, I'd wonder if you were lying to me again. That's not much of a marriage." "No, it's not." She nodded slowly like she was finally understanding the full scope of what she'd lost. "I'll file the papers Monday," she said. "I think that's best." Sunday morning, I was working in my shop when Marina North stopped by. She looked different. Lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a heavy weight and finally set it down. "I wanted to thank you," she said, examining a Victorian chair I was refinishing, "and to give you an update on our mutual friend. How's Chase handling his newfound freedom?" "Not well. He's been calling me non-stop, begging me to reconsider the divorce. Apparently, he's discovered that love doesn't pay the bills." Marina ran her fingers along the chair's carved armrest. "He also seems to think Laya is going to support him while he looks for a new job. That should be an interesting conversation." "Oh, it was. I may have accidentally mentioned to a few people that Laya was planning to leave you for him. Word travels fast in certain circles." Marina's smile was sharp. "I don't think your wife is going to be very popular at her office Christmas party this year. You've been thorough. I don't believe in half measures. Chase spent months humiliating me, making me look like a fool while he paraded around with his girlfriend. Now it's his turn to see how it feels." I understood the sentiment. There was something satisfying about watching people face the consequences of their choices, especially when those choices had caused pain to others. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Rebuild. Start over. Figure out who I am when I'm not married to a man who thinks he's smarter than everyone else." She picked up her purse. "What about you?" "Same thing, I suppose." "Well, if you ever want to have dinner with someone who understands what it's like to be betrayed by someone you trusted, give me a call." She handed me a business card. Not a date, just two people who've been through the same thing comparing notes. After she left, I went back to work on the Victorian chair. It had been damaged by years of neglect. The finish was scarred, the joints were loose, and one of the legs had been broken and poorly repaired. But underneath the damage, the original craftsmanship was still sound. With patience and skill, it could be beautiful again. Some things could be restored, others were too broken to save. Monday evening, Laya came home with divorce papers and a resignation letter from her job. "I can't stay at TechFlow," she explained. "Everyone knows about the affair. It's too awkward." "What will you do?" "I don't know. Look for something else, I suppose. Maybe in another city. That might be best." We signed the papers at the kitchen table where we'd shared 10 years of meals, sitting under the chandelier I'd restored from a 1920s hotel. The irony wasn't lost on me, ending our marriage surrounded by the beautiful things I'd brought back to life. "I really am sorry, Jack," Laya said as she packed the last of her belongings. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I want you to know I believe you. Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I considered the question while I watched her fold clothes into a suitcase. The same suitcase she'd used for our honeymoon in Ireland, back when we thought we'd be together forever. "Maybe someday," I said finally. "But not today." She nodded and finished packing in silence. After she left, I walked through our house, my house now. looking at the furniture we'd collected together. Each piece told a story. The dining room table from an estate sale in Bar Harbor, the bedroom set from an antique shop in Kennebunkport, the bookshelf I'd built from reclaimed barnwood. I'd spent years surrounding myself with beautiful things that had been damaged and abandoned, bringing them back to life with patience and skill. But I'd failed to notice that my marriage was broken beyond repair, destroyed not by time or neglect, but by deliberate betrayal. Some things could be fixed. Others needed to be thrown away and replaced with something better. I poured myself a drink and sat down in my favorite chair, a 1940s leather armchair I'd found at a flea market and spent months restoring. Outside, Portland was settling into another October evening, and I could hear the distant sound of the harbor foghorn calling ships safely home. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. The game was over, and I'd won, not by being the smartest or the strongest, but by refusing to be the victim. Chase North had lost his job, his wife, and his reputation. Laya had lost her marriage, her lover, and her carefully constructed plans for the future. And me? I'd lost a wife who'd never really been mine to begin with. But I'd gained something more valuable. The knowledge that I was stronger than I'd thought, smarter than my enemies had assumed, and capable of fighting back when someone tried to destroy my life. The antique clock on the mantelpiece chimed 9 times, each note clear and true. I'd restored that clock myself, replacing broken springs and worn gears until it kept perfect time again. Some things I reflected were worth saving. Others were just taking up space where something better could go. I raised my glass in a silent toast to new beginnings, then settled back in my chair to plan what came next. After all, I had a whole life to rebuild.